Okay, let's kick this started. So my name is Aleksa. This is Ryan, and we will be talking today about one really interesting topic that I think there a lot of people want to or have let's say have an opinion about this topic. Okay. And basically this meeting will be 1 hour long, so we don't want to take too much of everyone's time. So the agenda will be the following. I'll ask Ryan to give a short introduction from his side, then I'll do a short introduction from my side, and then we'll start discussing about why iOS engineers are hesitant towards adopting Kotlin Multiplatform, alongside with our thoughts how we can potentially influence that. So Ryan, thank you very much for taking the time to attend this webinar. It was with us.
Yeah.
Can you please introduce yourself to the people here and to the people who will be listening to this webinar over YouTube in just one short sentence?
For sure. Yeah. Again, my name's Ryan Simon. I currently work as a staff Android engineer at Monzo, which, for those that don't know, is a fintech based in the UK and has been expanding out to the US and very soon Europe. So a lot of my work at Monzo is around Android, but I also have a lot of experience with the iOS and web. I think what's relevant to this talk and this conversation and multi-platform is that I've been using multi-platform, sort of advocating for it since about 2019. I'm a big advocate for it. I've been using it for a while. Not at Monzo specifically, but other companies that I've worked at. I've implemented Kotlin Multiplatform, got it to production, have had to convince some iOS engineers about, why we should do that. And yeah, a little about me.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Ryan. Short introduction from my side. My name is Aleksa. I'm co-founder and CTO at Aetherius, company focused on building mobile apps for our clients. We started by focusing on iOS and Android native, but eventually, a couple of years ago, we started investing a lot of efforts towards Kotlin Multiplatform and now Compose Multiplatform. So we have a lot of hands-on experience on this topic, and I actually met Ryan over LinkedIn when we were both advocating for Kotlin Multiplatform adoption.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's actually how we met. So yeah, let's get this started. So we have 10 basically hypotheses of why iOS developers don't want to adopt KMP, and we will go over all of them and discuss them further. If you have any questions for us, please write them in the chat while we're discussing, and we will go over all of them at the end of this 1 hour call. So first, and I think the most straightforward one is, I don't want to do cross-platform. So that's I was there. I'm not gonna lie, I was there. But yeah, Ryan,
Yeah.
what do you think about this one?
Yeah, I mean, this is a common thing, and honestly, it's not uncommon to also hear this from Android engineers. So, and I think honestly, I think a lot of it is like the bad taste in people's mouth that they've gotten from other cross-platform technologies like React Native, Flutter, etc. Maybe they just don't want to have to learn a complete new tool set. So, you think about Flutter, you're learning Dart, you're learning a whole new way of doing your programming. If you're not already a web developer or React Native, there's a lot there that you have to learn. I think one of the advantages of Kotlin is that even if you're an iOS developer, Swift and Kotlin are quite similar, right? So I think that's already like a nice place to start over the other options that are out there. But yeah, I completely understand the hesitancy here of like, I don't want to deal with that. I want to deal with maybe some of the potential like downsides that we see often in cross-platform, where you come across certain edge cases and then there's no real good solution for it. I think that's a pretty common thing that comes up when you think about cross-platform. Now, in my mind, and what I've seen with my own experience with multi-platform on Kotlin, is that because JetBrains designed it from the beginning to not try and do everything perfectly, like try to like, I think React Native and Flutter sort of assume in the design of those frameworks that you're going to be able to figure everything out within the framework. Kotlin Multiplatform gives you this flexibility to create solutions that are specific to the platform. So if you need to, you can go native to each platform you target and solve specific platform specific problems, which is almost always going to be the case when you get into more complex use cases. So I think that's, both the reasons why we wouldn't and why we would want to look at something like Kotlin. But yeah, I'm curious to hear from your experience.
Yeah, from my side, pretty similar. So in my opinion, actually, and that's something that I want to discuss with you, is where was that point in your career where you were like, okay, I was doing native until this.
Yeah.
Okay, now I'm ready to explore Kotlin multi-platform. So from our
Yeah.
side, it was kind of like driven by the by our clients. So as we started having more startup clients which wanted to develop which wanted for us to develop their solutions faster, to get to MVP faster, to reach the product market fit. And basically we, at that point, we had an option to go either Flutter, React Native, or Kotlin multi-platform. We assumed
Yeah.
Kotlin multi-platform because we had a strong Android native team, and we
Right.
never looked back since. So for us, it was kind
Yeah.
of like a natural decision. So I'm curious to hear from your side about that one. And
Yeah.
the other thing about comparing Kotlin multi-platform with like pure cross-platform frameworks like Flutter and React Native, I still have when I'm talking to my iOS developer friends, I still it's difficult to me to explain to them that like Kotlin multi-platform is not like Flutter and React Native, and that it allows you to share only the domain layer if you want, only the data
Right.
layer if you want. Like
Yeah.
this sort of flexibility, in my opinion and from my experience, is something which pushes Kotlin multi-platform forward when compared to these other
Yeah.
cross-platform frameworks. So yeah,
Yeah.
what was the turning point for you, where when you were like, yeah, I wanna do some cross-platform?
Yeah. I mean, I think part of it, and I think this is really where it should come from, and it's exactly where it came from for you, which is like a business need, right? And like essentially what skill sets are available on your team or to yourself, and what's going to make sense for you or your team. For me, I was working at uh, Weedmaps at the time, which is a cannabis tech company based here in California, and we there was some rumblings from higher up business people in the company that they were asking why we're not using React Native. This was back in 2018, 2019. So um came down to my manager, who then asked or was talking to me about it because I was on the platform team for Android and iOS at the time, and I was like, well, definitely don't want to do that because all of our apps are already native, and it would be a significant effort for us to go React Native. Um, and so that's really where it came from for us, is like looking at what is an option for us where we can still get some great productivity boost by sharing code between platforms, but not have to completely rebuild our apps or anything like that. And of course, like continue to take advantage of the talent that we have, knowledge that we already have, and of course, there's always advantages to building native, and that was something that was still important for our business. So that was really the genesis of that, and then I just dug into it. Now at that time, the tooling for KMP was quite quite minimal. It was a lot of messing around with Gradle, like, you still have to mess around with it somewhat, but it was like way worse back then. So it was more complex to get it set up. But that was the reason why I started looking at it.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I love the perspective that like every decision basically which we are making as an engineer should come from the business need and not vice versa. So definitely, it's also a place where I see potential for Kotlin multi-platform in native apps because you know how easy it is to convert an existing app, put it inside Kotlin multi-platform container, and from that point onwards you can start writing shared code where something like that, like if you have an existing app in some language and then you want to rewrite it in Flutter or React Native, it would mean a full app rewrite. And like I think that's one of the main benefits for Kotlin multi-platform when we're talking about the existing large-scale native apps, which can
Yeah.
definitely benefit by just like sharing the domain layer. Don't replicate the models. Use the same strings across stacks. So definitely, that's like that. Those are the real business needs, and I think the time for Kotlin multi-platform is coming. I'm starting to see. I would not say a lot, but from time to time, a job requirement, which is like specifically asking for some Kotlin multi-platform experience, and I'm
Yeah.
seeing them more and more. And I think like the Kotlin multi-platform time will still come, and that like anybody
Yeah.
start working on
I
it
mean,
now, it's still a bit early. Yeah.
yeah, I think at least in the US, I see quite a few large organizations that have invested pretty significantly into multi-platform, and I'm seeing it pop up more. I'm starting to see even like Compose multi-platform, which is obviously sharing the UI. But that I'm seeing it happen more often. I see a lot of React Native still,
Mm-hmm.
especially for startups. I think it's kind of the default that people think about, and this is actually more of a promotional problem that JetBrains has around Kotlin multi-platform is like getting the word out. To your point, like earlier point you mentioned, yeah, how do you show iOS developers or other developers like what is different about Kotlin multi-platform? There's a lot of talking about it, but I think there's not as much showing. And I think JetBrains could do a better job of showing people through you know, some fancy sizzle reels or something, just like, okay, what is the difference? Like, why would you want to use this technology over it? But yeah, also curious, I think just to remind people, like, we're taking questions in the chat and would love to hear other perspectives.
Yeah, definitely, and thanks for the shout out. So please leave the comments in the and questions in the chat if you have them. And yeah, shortly coming back to next thing I want to discuss with you, and it's kind of like all of these questions are mutually related. So
Yeah,
the thing is like people are saying I don't want to learn other language. So I spent like 7 years, 8 years, 9 years
yeah,
being specialized in iOS and in Swift. Like, why would I want to learn Kotlin law, and why would I need it? So, what's your perspective on that?
yeah. Well, again, I think it kind of depends on what the needs are for the business that you work for, or even in like your particular area where you work in, what the demands look like. So what I've noticed a lot is, and this is just something I've noticed in the last few years, not just in Europe and in those areas where I feel like the expectation has been for a while that you would know some things about both platforms. The US would have a lot of specialized mobile engineers, but that is going away. So there's more of an expectation from the business that you can't just be an iOS engineer and you can't just be an Android engineer. You need to be able to at least dabble in the other one. And if anything, like be able to do something like a React Native or a Kotlin multi-platform or Flutter, because the demands for that are just increasing, and it makes sense naturally, right? Like mobile is a very expensive investment for businesses. And as more and more startups kind of look at how they want to build out their apps, the multi-platform or cross-platform technologies look a lot more interesting. In my mind, and in my opinion, if I was going to choose one of these things that I wanted to be successful and really, really popular, it would be Kotlin, right? So in my mind, it's sort of inevitable. Like the way I look at this and have looked at it for years now, which is why I advocate for Kotlin Multiplatform, is that it's inevitable that we are going towards and have been accelerating towards a world where, as mobile engineers, we can't just be platform specific. We're going to have to be writing code for multiple platforms because that's just the demands of the business. Like, that is not a choice we're going to be able to get to make very often. I think there's going to be rare cases where, companies need specialized people for very specific things, and like those people will probably make great money just doing like very specialized iOS or Android things. But in general, I think especially when you look at consumer apps, that's that's just not going to be the case. You're going to need to do both. So in my mind, I think it's actually a career move for you to learn other languages. Like for me, I was very resistant for a while there, not wanting to learn iOS. Honestly, I had good reason. Objective-C was not a fun language to learn. But then once Swift came around, Swift UI came around, I was like, okay, you know what? Now's my time. I'm gonna go learn this. Like, I definitely want to be knowledgeable about it, at least, at least good enough with it. I can be dangerous on iOS, and that's my suggestion for people who are sort of resistant to Kotlin generally. Like, forget about multi-platform for a second. Just thinking about your own career in your own like marketability as an engineer, I think it actually behooves you to learn Kotlin and other tool sets in mobile. So even that may mean learning React Native and building an app with it, and learning Flutter and building an app with it. Give yourself some diverse perspectives and skill sets, so that way you can pull from that if you need to.
Yeah. Thank you, Ryan. I love the perspective that like you're seeing it the way I'm seeing it as well. That like betting on not betting on cross-platform languages, but let's say investing some time to learn something different than what you're doing right now and expanding your skill set as a mobile engineer in the long run can only be a benefit for you, because like I'm also seeing what you're seeing, that the specialized engineers will be less and less probably needed in the future. So definitely we are on the same page on that. And I think I think actually Kotlin and Swift are a good starting point, because like they're really similar. And if you like, okay, you said try out React Native, and I definitely agree, you should try it out. But like I think more natural would be switching from Swift to Kotlin, Kotlin to Swift.
Oh yeah.
And then see what you can leverage for that. I also saw, as you said, like if we now don't talk about Kotlin multi-platform, I saw and I'm seeing a lot of posts requiring native iOS and native Android experience in the same
I'm seeing that too. Yeah.
In the same candidate. So it's not like bad thing. It's a necessity going further to like people knowing multiple things, and the time of specialized engineers is slowly passing away at least when it comes to mobile. And to touch on the next topic, which you briefly touched, is Objective-C. And for those of you who maybe have experience working with Kotlin multi-platform, pretty much until recently, until a couple of days ago, like with this new Kotlin version which got released previously, you were being exported the iOS code in a form of Objective-C headers. So when we were starting, Ryan, with Kotlin multi-platform some time ago, you know how much it was difficult at sometimes to consume those headers and actually like make the iOS app work and behave properly. from our perspective right now, we wanted to share everything, including view models. So we had to write our own custom wrappers on top of some Kotlin multi-platform things
Yeah,
to make that work. So probably you had some similar workarounds which you had to make.
correct.
But
Yeah.
yeah, but now with this Swift interoperability, or let's say Swift export, so what do you think? How I mean, of course, it will hopefully influence positively the iOS community and the Android community to try out Kotlin multi-platform. But how big of a deal you think that is?
In terms of the Objective-C exporting, like how that's potentially problematic. I've got a couple questions here that I want to get to, but maybe this will partially answer. A tool had this question, which was, yeah, like how close are we to feature parity with Swift in terms of build stability debugging? I think that's to be determined because we just, like Aleksa just said, like we just saw Swift export come to experimental for the newest version of Kotlin. And so, yeah, TBD, how well that's working and all of that. Early signals are good. But generally, like, and I think this is just the case no matter what, like the tooling will always be better when you're working directly with the platform, right? I don't think that's really ever in contest here. Your tooling will always be better if you're working directly with the platform. That said, I think the KMP tooling in general has gotten significantly better over time. A lot of time has been spent by JetBrains to actually make the development environment more integrated. Like now you can actually write Swift and look at Swift code and navigate Swift code within Android Studio, which is huge. Couldn't do that for a while. In my opinion, Android Studio is better than Xcode, so I prefer that. So, you know, there's these things that continue to get invested in, and I think that's another reason why I'm very bullish, is that JetBrains continues to invest there, and they're a great tooling company. So I think that that's super important to the continued adoption. As for the original question, which was around Objective-C code, I actually have noticed that the level of effort to get the wrappers in, and then you use libraries like Ski, which actually kind of automate a lot of this. It's not crazy. Like, I don't think it is like significant effort when you then think about what the payoff is. So like once you set that stuff up, you don't really have to worry about it that much anymore. So it's sort of like this cost that you pay up front, and then once you've paid that cost, you don't really need to worry too much about it after that, right? And it's just more of like training your team on how to best leverage those wrappers and, you know, make things work better. In general, I've gotten really positive feedback from the iOS engineers that I've worked with that work with these wrappers, that generally it still feels very Swift like. It's, you know, and I think that is really, for me, what was most important is like, I know as an Android engineer, I wouldn't want things to feel too like disconnected from Kotlin, right? I want it to feel as native as possible, just so that you can stay in flow better, and like there's just less interruptions in terms of how you have to think about how you're interacting with the code. And again, KMP has gotten better and better over time on this, and part of that is the community, right? So Ski is developed by TouchLab, and TouchLab has been honestly pivotal to a lot of the tooling and advancements in KMP in the community. So like there's great community libraries and all of that. So I think when you think about all of that stuff, like using the Objective-C code, sure, kind of annoying right now, but the good thing is that both JetBrains and the community have been working on solutions to make this significantly easier and less of a thing. So that's my opinion.
Yeah, I love the perspective. Mostly when you said like that's the price you pay up front, and if we like
Yeah,
talk about a couple of years ago and how difficult was it to set up a Kotlin multi-platform project, all of the bindings. But after
yeah,
you set up that, after you pay that price, it's like just
it's pretty smooth.
pretty smooth. Yeah, pretty streamlined. So definitely on we're on the same page about
Yeah.
that one. And Another concern a lot of people have, because like when talking about cross-platform frameworks like Flutter and React Native, we constantly debate about performances and about the app size and how much impact will the users have.
Yeah.
So did you, when you integrated KMP into this previous app you had a chance to work on, did you experience
Mhm.
downgrade in performances or things like that? So what's your
Yeah.
experience?
Yeah, performance. Yeah, it's interesting. I actually, before I get to that, I wanted to just quickly address Jesus had a question about CMP in the chat. I wanted to just ask you when you want to maybe address that one. We don't have to address it now, but
Yeah, we can do it at the end of the call. We'll go through
okay,
both.
cool.
Okay.
All right. I just wanted to give Jesus a heads up.
Yeah.
Um, cool. Yeah, as far as performance, I think from a performance perspective, the nice thing is that we're talking about Kotlin native, right? So I don't want to confuse too many people here that are not as familiar with Kotlin multiplatform, but there is this concept of, Kotlin targeting these different compilers, right? And so you can think of it as like Kotlin itself then gets like transpiled or compiled into these different languages and exported, right? And so Kotlin native essentially is the target for platforms like iOS, desktop. And the good thing is that Kotlin native over time has seen performance improvements. I think initially there were some concerns around like concurrency, so like there were some concerns around concurrency. How does that operate, especially with like there was a lot of threading problems actually early on, if you remember. There were issues with concurrency and just like complexity around how that worked and how did you release memory, and like these things were honestly really, really complex actually. They solved that with a big update, I think it was like 2 years ago. And so really ever since then, I haven't really seen a big issue. App size, haven't really seen, a huge uptick in app size, especially if you're using tools that will like just kind of like clean up your final production
Mhm.
APK or IPA. So like I haven't seen that really be a big thing. Build times also haven't really seen it impact build times too much. But again, it's one of those things where like it may initially have some trouble, and I think this is where you have to invest upfront again on looking at like the build tools and that kind of thing and really set it up properly. Kind of hinted at this at the beginning when I mentioned kind of the Gradle setup. It can be a little daunting at first because there is quite much to do there, and they've been improving this. They've been making this better, and now actually, like JetBrains has been investing in their own like build system specifically for multi-platform projects, which I think is actually a great way to go about this because I think Gradle just has a lot of challenges in terms of dealing with these things. So again, great thing is if there are problems, those problems are being actively worked on and being solved for. But overall, from a performance perspective, I haven't really seen it impact a lot. At least
Yeah,
not in any way that was like really impactful to user experience, which is the most important thing.
exactly, 100%. So the user experience is always the first thing we should consider when adopting some new technology. Again, under the hood of this user experience, there is also things like app size, memory management, etc. And yeah, I definitely remember at the beginning the threading issues and like how I mean, like, okay, there were issues, but what I remember is how difficult was it to fix them and to detect them and to debug them. So it was super hard. But to be honest, for a while we did not encounter any of those kind of issues. Everything is pretty streamlined. So Definitely, I would say it's pretty on par when you're building like fully native app and like Kotlin
Yeah.
platform. I would say it's pretty much on par at the moment, and that actually gives me, I mean, gets me to our next thing, which I would love to discuss with you. Is some of the people are like talking about like how big of a benefit it is if you're only sharing the business layer, or if you're
Mm,
only sharing business layer and view model, and not the UI. Like
the
they're
UI.
they're
Yeah.
arguing like, is it more of a benefit, or would it maybe be faster just if you have platform engineers write that from scratch? So what's your opinion?
Yeah. It's a good question. Um, Maybe before we get to that, I'm just curious if you're down for this, but Atul had another question
Mhm.
relating to what we were just talking about with, the difference between like the Android garbage collector with Kotlin versus Kotlin natives memory manager, and like if that has affected like iOS engineers' hesitation to adoption.
Yeah, you want to cover this now, or
Yeah, I mean, I think since we were
you're
just
like,
talking
yeah,
about it.
okay,
Yeah, I we'll come back to
the
the
other,
shared layer, but like I think in my opinion, that's like one of the last things that has come up. Like I don't really hear a lot of iOS engineers being like, oh yeah, this like difference in how memory management works is really concerning to me. I think maybe in very particular circumstances, I could see this coming up, but I'll just say from my own experience, it's never come up.
yeah, pretty much same here. Maybe as I mentioned, 2 or 3 years ago, when we had these issues with threats and things like that, we dived more deeper into the reference counting mechanism, etc., and what does the Kotlin use, what does Swift use, etc. But in, like, I would say, real world scenario, if you would be starting a Kotlin multi-platform app right now, I don't think you would end up in a situation when you will need to think about these kind of things. So yeah,
Yeah,
didn't
yeah,
have
it's a
much.
good question though.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, thanks, Atul. Yeah, so getting back to the the business logic sharing, kind of like, what
Mhm,
is really the benefit there if it's just the business layer? I actually would say it depends on the app. And I
mhm,
think this goes back to what we were talking about, like use the right tool for the right job. Maybe KMP is not always the right tool for the job. So if you have a very UI heavy experience and your app is mostly just like a fancy like REST consumption UI, which honestly there's a lot of apps that are like that,
yeah.
maybe it's not valuable enough for you. And I could totally see that being a thing. Uh, it also depends on when you are implementing KMP. So if I'm starting a new project, I mean, I'll just say this. If I'm starting a new project today, brand
Mhm,
new, I'm
mhm,
going to use Compose multi-platform and I'm going to use KMP, right? So like I'm just going to do everything in that environment because personally, like I said earlier, I believe kind of just this is the way forward for app development. And then if I need to drop down to native Android or native iOS or whatever platform I'm targeting to solve specific issues, I'll do that, right? So I think that's kind of like my thinking. Now, if you already have an existing app and you're like, oh, maybe it'd be interesting to share some code between platforms, where should I start or what should I be looking at doing? I would say, again, depends on the problem you're trying to solve. I would say, like, I'll give you an example
mhm.
that unfortunately I was not able to convince Monzo to do this, but I think it was actually a really, really good implementation or potential implementation of multi-platform tech. So we have a server-side rendering at Monzo, and what we do is we basically provide a JSON that describes a screen, and then the Monzo app, has a bunch of components that are defined, right? And those components are then available on both platforms to then build out these screens.
Mhm.
That is a perfect use case for sharing code. And even if we were just sharing the business logic in this case, it would be tremendously valuable because there have been many times, not just a couple times, but many times where things would go wrong on one platform but not the other. And we're not talking about like platform specific stuff like navigation, which is like a common thing, but like no, just, oh, this data wasn't rendered the way we wanted it to, or it didn't come through the way we wanted it to. And of course, I would take it a step further and say it's a great use case for Compose multi-platform because, this UI is meant to be consistent, right? It's meant to be reliable. It's meant to be very predictable for the backend engineers that put together those flows. And so that's like one way where I think, oh yeah, if you're doing server-side based UI, you should absolutely be building that in a multi-platform technology. And I think Kotlin is a really great fit for that if your apps are already native.
Yeah. He also said the server-driven UI pattern, right? So yeah,
Yes. Yeah.
yeah. That's a wonderful example. And like a lot, you touched a little bit about consistency, and
Yeah.
I worked, and probably you worked on many different organizations where constantly you get things like this text or this string is different, this behavior is different between platforms, this image is different
Right.
between platforms. So if we just think about like the consistency things and how easy it is to address them with Kotlin multi-platform, like that's also an example of
Yeah. I would actually, so another example where again, I just didn't have enough influence or something, to get this
a
across. But at Monzo, we recently rolled out like a way to deal with translation. And the reason for that, of course, is as I mentioned earlier, Monzo's been expanding to other regions, right?
Mhm.
So it's expanding into Spain, and it's needing to not just deal with English because that's what we were dealing with between U.S. and UK. Like English is roughly the same. There's a couple things that are a little bit different in spelling, but like, not a lot of extra effort to localize. But then when you start thinking about, oh, well, now we got to support Spanish, or
Yeah.
maybe if we go into Italy, we got to support Italian. This goes back to why you would want to use multi-platform. This is a great thing where the strings that you're using are likely going to be 100% identical. And what you would really want is you'd want that to be available on both platforms and the logic to be the same, right? Because you want that consistency, you want that reliability as a business. And it actually can be a legal concern because when you think about accessibility,
Mhm.
these are requirements that come through, and there are, especially in the United States, there are businesses that are literally designed to use the legal entities and the laws in place for accessibility to chase down companies that are not doing this properly. So there's even more incentive, especially in the US where like everyone sues each other, to to have consistency for some of these things. But I think again, it's picking the right problems where that consistency is just hyper valuable. And then, obviously part of this is influencing different parts of the organization to go and run with it. But yeah, I think, wherever you need that consistency or want that consistency, it is super valuable.
Yeah, definitely. From my and our previous perspective, it has brought a lot of confidence into the releases because, like, that the platforms are unified. You know that the things are behaving the same on Android and iOS. You know that the strings are unified, as you said. So it has
Yeah.
brought a lot of developer confidence into code we are shipping. So definitely a lot of benefits this technology has. And bringing me to our next thing is something which you brought up that you heard that Apple might stop apps that use KMP for being on the App Store. And another one
Yeah.
which is also funny, which I heard is, I mean, it's not maybe funny, but that Google will kill Kotlin because they
I mean, you know what? Google's killed a lot of stuff. So,
yeah, yeah, that
but yeah. So I think this is a good one. I'll start with the Apple might stop apps that
Yeah.
use KMP. I mean, I guess then they'd have to start killing or pausing apps or taking apps off the App Store they're using React Native or Flutter. And I think that a lot of companies would be very, very angry if they did that. So honestly, I just don't see that being real. Because there's just so many other options that people are using. And if anything, Apple would prefer people continue to use KMP because it still requires you to have an Apple device. And at the end of the day, that's what Apple wants. Now, I think technically you still need an Apple device for Flutter deployment and React Native deployment, but I would just say like any of those things still require Apple devices. Apple is at the end of the day a hardware company. That's how they make their profits. So I look at incentives. Apple's not really incentivized from stopping you there, right? I think, if anything, if they're continuing to get money from you as a developer, they still are getting their cut from you when you sell your subscriptions or whatever. Like that's what Apple cares about. So as long as these technologies are not taking away Apple's ability to make money from you and your customers, they don't care what you write your apps in.
Yeah, it's all about business, like, yeah. So
Yeah, yeah. So if anything for them, it's like I think like if somebody else is actually solving the tooling problem for us and we don't have to make our stuff better, great, they're saving money.
yeah,
That's kind of how I look at it.
yeah, definitely. And what do you think about this Google will kill Kotlin multi-platform concept?
Yeah. Well, actually couple things. So I think number one, I think before they could kill Kotlin multi-platform, they'd have to kill Kotlin. And obviously they can't do either of those things because Kotlin is run by the Kotlin Foundation, which is funded by both Google, JetBrains, and other companies. So the good thing is that this is, Kotlin is completely open source. Kotlin multi-platform is open source. All these things, they fall under Kotlin Foundation, and it's mostly JetBrains that drives it anyway. And again, the reason why I have been bullish for so long on Kotlin is because the right incentives are there. JetBrains is incentivized to get more and more people on their tooling, right? So as a tooling company, they want you using the languages that they have and the tools that they have because they make more money from that, right? So again, I love looking at incentives, and the incentives are aligned between JetBrains and Kotlin and developers, in my opinion. So that's why I continue to say, like, yeah, it's got a bright future because of that. Now, if Google said, yeah, we're going to stop using multi-platform, we're going to stop using Kotlin, we're going to use something completely different, we're going to go all in on Dart, and Flutter because that's our language and that's our thing. I'd be super surprised, number one, but also like, it wouldn't kill it. Like you would still, yeah, everything on Go. Uh, we would still, we'd still be using Kotlin for things, right? So I just can't see that really happening. I don't really see a lot of benefits.
Yeah, I love the perspective from your side, which is like you're analyzing every company and what incentive does it have. So okay, JetBrains has incentive to bring more people towards their tooling. Apple has incentive to keep people using their iOS devices. We as a developer have
Yeah,
incentive as being more employable in the future. So everybody's
yeah,
incentive. So that's why you're actually bullish. So it's not like
yeah. Exactly. I think you got, maybe people have heard the saying, but like you just need to follow the money, right? So if you follow the money, that is where, you'll almost never be wrong about what's the right thing to do as far as your investment and your time commitment as an engineer is just like, where is the money going? That's probably where you want to be.
Yeah, yeah, 100%, 100%. And that brings us towards our last topic for today, and then we have quite a few questions in the chat that we
Yeah.
will go over. So something which you already mentioned, and one of the concerns which people both from the iOS and from the Android world suffer from when they start thinking about Kotlin multi-platform is that there is not enough documentation about it. There are not enough code samples. There are not enough companies talking openly about how did they adopt Kotlin multi-platform.
Yeah,
So what
this
is
is true.
yeah, what is your feeling about that? What is the reason like for that? And will it change in the future? So how are you seeing that?
I think it is changing already. Like I've already seen like more books come out for it. I've seen a lot better documentation from JetBrains themselves on the Kotlin website about this. Google has been investing quite significantly in KMP. For those that maybe don't know this, a lot of their, not a lot, but a handful of their very popular Jetpack libraries for Android have been converted to KMP recently. So like you're seeing a lot of investment here, and documentation has been getting better and it's continuing to get better. I think the most important things for me has always been sample projects for people. Like you want to be, as an engineer, I think, at least again, my opinion, you want to be able to like look at uh examples of how to do this thing and how to make it work and like what's possible. And so the good thing is there's quite a few great example projects out there. Honestly, for the longest time, TouchLab had sort of the example, of like how to get started. CampKit is, I think they still call it CampKit. CampKit's amazing. Again, JetBrains has their own stuff as well through Kotlin. And I think, in general, it's gotten way better in my opinion. Is it perfect? No. But honestly, I look at like iOS documentation and I'm like, I don't know, it's way rougher out there. So it's a lot harder to get started as a Swift or Swift UI developer, in my opinion. So I actually think Kotlin and Google, JetBrains have done a really great job with their documentation so far, and it continues to improve. And I also think if you look at it from a community perspective, there's a lot of community documentation. There's a lot of community examples, and I think that is enough. Like I think there is enough, in my
Mhm.
opinion. Yeah.
Yeah. So shortly to summarize what you said, what you said that Kotlin and JetBrains have a lot better documentation than iOS and Swift. 100% agreed. I was blown away how the documentation is.
Yeah.
To be honest,
Yeah.
I was like, oh, this is how the documentation should be written. Nice.
Yeah.
So,
I feel like Apple at some point, like I think early on Apple had great documentation. Like early in the platforms, like in Android actually had terrible documentation. And then at some point Google decided, crap, we really need, again, incentives. We really need to get more high quality development on Android. How do we do that? For them, it was obvious we need to teach people how to make great Android apps. And that's what they did, right? And they've continued to invest in developer relations. They have dedicated people on that. Like it is a whole ecosystem for them. That does not really exist for Apple. And if you think again, incentives, Apple knows that more people make revenue on iOS, generally speaking, than on Android. Of course, it depends app to app, but like, they understand they don't have to try as hard to get you to use their platform, and so they're just not as incentivized to give you great documentation. So yeah, it's super annoying, but that's how it is.
yeah, they feel like they don't have to try, and yeah, that's
Yeah,
why they don't do anything.
yeah.
So yeah, we have covered all of the topics which I had in mind for today. I
Well, okay, there was one in here that I think we skipped over it, which I
no,
think is super
we
interesting.
we'll go over through all of the Q&A now.
Okay,
So that's
okay.
we have 10
No,
minutes.
I was gonna say no. I'd say there's a topic here about team structure, how KMP influences team structure.
Oh yeah, definitely.
I think maybe we take a couple minutes to do that, and then we go into questions because I definitely want to answer questions.
Yeah, let's discuss.
Yeah. So yeah, the question is like, how does adopting KMP potentially influence team structure? I think this is a really important one because there is a sort of almost like this is the thought that I would imagine going through iOS engineers like heads is like, well, if we become more efficient by sharing more code, and a lot of that code is in Kotlin, which is like an Android, more Android leaning thing, does that mean my role gets eliminated or is less important or whatever?
Mm-hmm.
And what I would say is, I'm just going to be really blunt with it. Yes, probably. If you are not stepping into like being part of the solution, right, and like making, making that adoption happen and being someone who is really engaged with it, there is a world, and I mentioned this earlier, there is a world where as multi-platform and code sharing becomes essentially the expectation of
Mm-hmm.
mobile engineers, you will likely lose out on a lot of opportunities. And so I think that's really important. As far as like how the team structure gets influenced, absolutely. If you are already an Android engineer and you're very, very effective as a Kotlin engineer, like you will naturally have more opportunities in this space to take leadership, technical leadership, and that kind of thing. On the other side of it, though, is if you're an iOS engineer who is open to taking leadership, that is also incredibly valuable. And so I think it actually creates opportunities for certain engineers to step up and
Mm-hmm.
become really influential advocates and technical leads for these things. So there's definitely going to be people that get left behind, like it always happens, right? So like you can even think about it. I think about it like there's a lot of Android developers I know who waited and waited to learn Kotlin and become effective in Kotlin. I'm sure this also happens in iOS, Objective C to Swift. And those developers, basically, their opportunities dwindled and dwindled and dwindled, right? Like they still have some opportunities, but 99% of the jobs require Kotlin now, right?
Yeah.
So that's sort of how you have to look at this. Eventually, you don't have really much of a choice. And so I think it's best to be an engineer who's willing to kind of be at the forefront of some of these things and experiment and just be open-minded.
Mhm.
That's what businesses love to see. So yeah, that's my take.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Thank you for bringing that one up. Definitely, definitely an important topic. So you see, actually, you see it as an opportunity for people who are coming from an iOS perspective. They're open-minded. They could potentially like close the gap and fill into the some staff engineer positions with the
Yeah,
adoption of things like
100%, 100%.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Love the perspective. And when you're talking about people being left behind in the technology, it's definitely normal. I just want to shortly share with you some anecdote which happened to me some years ago. I was talking with one American company which was building a software for golfing apps, and
Okay.
their code was in Objective C, and I was talking to their iOS team leader, and we were discussing like, and I'm saying like, why Objective C, and she was like saying, but that's what I know the best. That's what the team knows the best. So we are sticking.
Yeah,
So definitely, I still see it as some rare cases, but sometimes even the whole teams are left behind if the, let's say,
right.
upper management don't recognize the opportunity to switch towards the new tech. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I always look at it as like as a engineer, you really should be looking forward at like what is happening, what are the trends in the industry, and how can you set yourself up so that you are best positioned as businesses incentives and desires and goals change. So that way you can step in and be really valuable. And I think that's, how I look at it. But I know we only have a few minutes left, so maybe we just get to questions.
Yeah, let's go. So
So I tried to check mark the stuff that we already answered. I wanted to get back to Jesus,
yeah, let's go.
talking about CMP. So let's see. Heard multiple complaints from other engineers that it still hides many challenges and feels somewhat green. I mean, my thought on that is that it is still green. iOS only recently went to production ready, and so it has been production ready for desktop for a long time. It's beta for web right now. Obviously, Jetpack Compose for Android has been great for many years. I look at this as like, again, a specific, like it's a project specific choice to make as to whether or not you're going to adopt Compose multi-platform. And I think if your team doesn't have any expertise on it, you just want to do like a test project and kind of see like, hey, can this technology solve the problem that we're looking for it to solve and do it in isolation? That's been really successful for me. But yeah, I'm curious what your take is, Aleksa.
Yeah. My take about Compose multi-platform is actually that it has its place inside production apps too. I will give an example of one client's app which we refactored from React Native to a mixture of let's say KMP and CMP. And what do I mean when I say mixture? So our navigation and the app is being set up in Kotlin Multiplatform ways. So navigation is natively on iOS, natively on Android, but the screens are being shared with Compose Multiplatform. So why we did that? Because at that point, swipe back functionality wasn't available. If you
Right, there was some navigation issues, yeah.
And we did this kind of container-based approach with keeping the navigation native and everything else is shared. And that has been proven to work really well for us. And what kind of flexibility also this gives you? This gives you flexibility of, for example, in your iOS app, one screen can be fully composed multi-platform, and then you can navigate to a screen that can be fully native. And
Right.
that's where, from my perspective, even now in production apps, Compose multi-platform makes sense, because you probably have some screens which don't require super rendering optimizations and things like that. And to be honest, we did not have any rendering issues with Compose multi-platform so far. But even if you're skeptical, most of your screens are probably just the REST wrappers or something like that. So you can keep them in Compose multi-platform and share them, and like navigate to next screen, it's iOS native. So I have a feeling that Compose multi-platform has its place. It still needs some work to be done, and definitely, but I'm super bullish, as you said. If I would be starting a project from tomorrow, it will be a mixture of KMP and CMP 100%. So
no, I'm with you. I'm with you on that.
Yeah, your take on Kotlin Wasm combined with Compose multi-platform for web?
Oh yeah, that was the next one. I personally haven't really messed with web much, but I do actually have a colleague who has, and they've had really good experiences with it. I think right now the limitation with that technology is that the accessibility is not great, and also pulling in existing web technology like other web packages that you might want to pull in to do certain things is not super easy to do. It's possible, but it's not really well integrated. And I think there's still a lot of work to do there. I've actually seen more people, at least initially, try the Compose HTML route, which is essentially using Compose as the sort of the compiler framework. So you're using Compose-like things, but it actually ends up being transpiled to HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and that has been successful. There's actually a project called KWeb, and KWeb's really interesting because it sort of has taken the Compose HTML and then added this layer on top to make it a lot more powerful and effective in building websites and web apps. And that's the project that I would look at if you're interested in doing some web stuff. So, I think it's still yet to be seen, I think, of the effectiveness of using Compose for web, but yeah, that's my opinion. Or yeah, sorry, Cobweb. you're right, Cobweb.
Yeah. From my perspective, I did try it out on I know there is a sample GitHub repo for all of the 3 targets, which has some like admin dashboard being rendered on iOS, Android,
Yeah.
and web. And I did it for a POC for one potential client at that time. And from my perspective, I don't think it's there yet to build something production with it.
Yeah.
Maybe in a year or two it will be there, but I don't think it's there yet. On the other hand, I'm more like interested to see how things will go in mobile, and then like, okay, the
Right.
web will be there to support. So
Yeah.
I'm more looking towards to what they do on the mobile side of things. I think that's something like,
Yeah, to be honest with you, I'm actually more bullish right now on Compose for desktop because I think about like how many of the mobile apps would naturally, especially if you're already developing for iPad and Android tablets, how many of those mobile apps would actually work really great as desktop clients. And like we've just seen how desktop clients over time have been dropped in terms of performance quality because they're all wrappers for JavaScript.
Mhm.
And they just there's very few of those wrappers that actually end up creating good user experiences on desktop, and people still want desktop apps, but also as a business there's less and less reason or incentive to like go fully native desktop app. So I think like Compose is actually a great middle ground. If you're already building it in multi-platform with Compose, it's a nice option that's available to you. And I think that's kind of the nice thing of using something like this. Similar to, back in the day, if you were running on the JVM and you're using, Java Swing or whatever, or Java FX, which is actually compatible with Compose Desktop if you want to pull stuff in for that. It's like, oh, it's going to run on all of these things. And now, Compose running across all these platforms, I think is really interesting. Obviously, it's similar to Flutter, but if you're already a mobile engineer, this this is kind of a natural step for you, and it's shown to work really well. And I know like there are still desktop developers out there that love using Compose because it's significantly nicer than JavaFX and some of these other things. So it's just a great, I think in general, it's like you're kind of putting yourself into this ecosystem where both as a developer and as a business, potentially, you are creating more options. There's more doors you can walk through without having to put a lot of significant, specific effort into making that work. And I think that, in my opinion, is super powerful. And again, going back to incentives, the business will always incentivize ways to cut cost, right? And how to be more effective and efficient. And so this is just kind of a natural path forward, in my opinion.
yeah. I to be honest, I didn't give it much thought. I didn't thought about that way, about desktop being an additional platform where the app could sell or the business could benefit from, but it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, we get a lot of people like who ask us for a desktop app for Monzo. And that makes a lot of sense, right? Because it's like you want to look at your money and you kind of want a bigger canvas, and maybe you're doing your finances and you want to just be able to have that open alongside of other things. And like we know our business customers ask for this a lot. And so, having the ability to just say, hey, like, well, we already have our Android app, that's all in Compose. We can actually just create our desktop app, or maybe even a Compose web app that is essentially the same as our Android app, and then we build out maybe like some custom stuff to deal with larger screens or whatever. But it opens up a lot of interesting opportunities to meet your customers where they're at, and what and essentially solve for things that they're asking for.
Yeah. Definitely agreed. And yeah, one more thing we have to cover is how do you convince upper management to go with Kotlin multi-platform, or that's something we were actually discussing
Yeah.
a lot on our calls. So yeah.
In my opinion, at least from my experience, it's been less about convincing upper management. It's been more about just convincing, let's say, the iOS engineers, or really coming up with a convincing use case, right? So I think it should always start with convincing use case, right? So you've got your use case and you build up like a really good proposal. This is what I would recommend if you're in this situation. You build up a nice proposal which encompasses the technical reasons, the business reasons, how it's going to make things better for developers, for the customer, all of those things, right? So cover all of that, obviously put your risks in, you know, be realistic with, you know, what some of the cost is and the investment. And you put that in front of your engineering manager or whatever. And if you can get sign off that way, then you can also start conversations with some of your like iOS leads or whatever and start to collaborate more on like, okay, if we did do this, what would that look like? And you know, how would that be? I feel like that's a really good place to start. But again, it should be use case driven, like we talked about earlier.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. I'll give some more examples from at least our current perspective, because like one of the things we do is help our clients migrate existing apps to Kotlin Multiplatform. So usually, as you said, Ryan, it starts with a good use case. So we don't go and
Yeah,
say to them, yeah, we'll refactor all of your apps. So usually it starts with a simple problem which they have, like for example, their analytics events aren't unified in terms of the name event and properties. And we're like,
right.
okay, let's start with Kotlin Multiplatform library, which you will inject as a sub-module to your native libraries, both iOS and Android, and you will make sure that they are being unified and sent to the SD, whichever SDKs you are using. And actually, right now
Right.
we're in the process of open sourcing one of that Kotlin Multiplatform analytics library, so it's going pretty nicely. But to back to the main point, give them a concrete example, give them an offer they can't refuse, give them
Right.
success stories, but not only success stories, build a proof of concept also. That works pretty well. Build
Yeah.
proof of concept, maybe some little scope. Is it a feature that you're working on? Something small which they can feel, and they can now say, okay, I can feel this going in the right direction. I can see all of these big companies and big players like thinking about that direction, adopting Kotlin multi-platform. This will make
Yeah.
sense for us, and give them business incentives, as Ryan said. So tell them, hey, this will bring 30% more development speed to our team. So
Yeah.
why don't do it? We'll crush all of
Yeah.
our competitors. So think in that perspective, at least. That's
Yeah, 100%. Like, yeah, Jesus jokingly saying, or well, it's really accurate actually. It's like, yeah, you're probably going to need less engineers potentially. The other way to look at it too, though, is it may not even necessarily reduce the number of engineers. It may actually just say, okay, we can now do more.
yeah.
I look at it as like you've got your team, and now there's all of these other things that you could work on
Yeah.
that maybe in the past you're like, oh, we got to build it for both platforms and we're splitting ourselves on that. Well, now it's like, well, Alexa, you get to do that feature A, I can go do feature B, and then, you know, we're doing that stuff in parallel, right? So I look at it as more of an accelerator. I try to look at less as a detractor. I think it's easy for us to go kind of in the negative zone of like, oh, this is going to take jobs and all this other stuff. The thing is that there's always more problems. There's always more features. Uh, and so if you think about it from that perspective, I think that's really great. Now, as an individual developer, obviously, again, this gives you a lot of power because you are now a significantly more effective individual and you can do a lot more, which is also fantastic. But yeah, there is still opportunity that, yeah, will it take some jobs potentially, I think, but also I think of it as like, no, now we can just do more, right? And I think that it makes the company um, more competitive, right? And like, you know, in consumer app space, especially, like you really want to be able to accelerate development wherever you can. And so I think, you know, that's kind of how I look at it.
Yeah, I'm saying it the same way. We could do more, and then we could bring more value to the business, and business could make more money. So maybe
Right.
it will bring some jobs, down, but maybe not necessarily across all of the organizations who will be adopting Kotlin Multiplatform. And yeah, the one last final question is, what do you think, Ryan? Well, for someone, Sudarshan is saying that he's starting his career. Is starting right away in Kotlin Multiplatform good or not?
Here's what I would say, and this is the advice that I give to everyone that I've mentored. One of the things I didn't mention before is that I'm a longtime mentor. I've been mentoring people into the industry for a little over 10 years now. And my advice is always to look at job postings and let the job postings guide you towards what technology you should know. So if you are in an area where there's a lot of job postings that are asking for Kotlin Multiplatform, then you should go learn Kotlin Multiplatform. But if a lot of your job postings are not asking for that and they're asking for React Native, then I think that's unfortunately where you should go. You know, I think it's all about your local area, where you work, you know, who you're going to be working for, what is the market demanding, right? And go after that. I think trying to become really good at a technology that is still not widely adopted and then forcing it upon the market is just not a great strategy for you, right? Maybe a good strategy for JetBrains because they want more people to spread the word. But I think for as an individual engineer, you want to be doing the things that are in demand locally, or at least wherever you can work. And so if multi-platform is one of those things, great. I would also make the argument, though, that multi-platform for now is still a mid-level to senior and above technology, meaning that it requires a lot of knowledge around architecture design, system design, the different platforms and all of that. So if you were interested in multi-platform, I think you should start with learning one of the mobile platforms first and getting confidence there in building apps there first and solving some of these system design / UUI things, and then look at multi-platform, because multi-platform really is an extension of all of the things that you're going to have a foundation of in one of these platforms already. So it is, in my opinion, way more demanding of an early engineer because it's just there's so much to have to know. And I would say the same about CMP. Is like I think CMP makes it a little bit easier because you know you just have to worry about compiling it to this one UI and like you know it's mostly going to work for you. And navigation has been solved more, you know, like more recently, like most of the navigation problems are solved. So like you can probably get away with CMP, compose multi-platform, and starting there. But in my opinion, you might as well start with Android and just learn Android, and then CMP is a very natural extension of that. But yeah, that's my opinion.
Yeah, I don't have much like here. So but I would also, even though I'm from an iOS engineering perspective, if I would be starting now and thinking about this kind of
See you,
things,
man.
like I would go with first with Android, because of Compose Multiplatform and Kotlin Multiplatform, and then expand on the other things. So yeah. Before we wrap up, Ryan, thank you very much for your time. I would like to shortly present and share with you something which me and my team have been working on for some time now. I'll share the link now. So we have built we have built a website where you can browse and download some of our production ready templates for
Oh, nice.
platform and Compose Multiplatform. So with the link in the code, all of you who attended the webinar can have a 10% of additional discount to all of our templates here. Of course, if you have any question about templates or you need any any additional support, don't hesitate to reach out to me on LinkedIn, on email, wherever you want. So yeah, go ahead.
That's awesome.
Visit the website. Let me know your feedback. I'm very open to hearing all sorts of feedback on our website, on our templates. So yeah. With that being said, thank you very much again, everyone, for coming to this webinar. I hope you learned something interesting. I hope you enjoyed. And again, Ryan, thank you very much. A lovely session. Valuable insights.
Yeah.
Like really enjoyed it. Hope you did too. And yeah.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
Thanks everyone for coming. And thanks for having me, Aleksa. Take care.
Thank you. See you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.